At this stage, it's probably an opportunity to reflect on some of the things we've been hearing. I'd like to hear from you as the audience. What are you noticing in terms of the themes that are emerging from the speakers this morning?
The big one's probably context, placing context around what's going on, sharing communications in an open environment that everybody understands and can get on the same page.
So, for those of you online, what the comment there was context, the importance of providing context, because as we all know, in the absence of context, human beings will simply make up their own. We call it rationalisation. So I would urge all leaders to set the context, make it straightforward and simple, and repeat it often and consistently, because otherwise you may get your people doing their best version of what they think you meant. Anyone else? What other themes are emerging here? Sorry, go John.
I was to say it's probably slightly cliche, but look after your people, the business will look after itself.
Oh, the irony. You imagine how good business would be without the customers and the staff. And yet none of us can succeed without our people. Good point, John, thank you. What else are we hearing here? Anyone that's listening in? I'll give you a moment to gather your thoughts. Gentlemen.
Accountability. I appreciate being surrounded by people who are being accountable for their actions and not making excuses, but instead of excuses, we're replacing it with learnings. And I think in today's world, that is an unusual trait, and it stands out as a diamond from the rough.
Great. What I've picked up so far is, and everyone, I want to thank you for your generosity and your honesty in talking about the mistakes that you've made. And early on in my career, I made plenty of them as well. And I'm not a speaker here today, so I won't get into any of that. But certainly, one of the interesting things that I've heard about mistakes is this. It's a statement that goes that there are no mistakes, only learning. So philosophically, we've spoken about organisational cultures. And I wonder if your organisational culture is one that has actually pulled mistakes out as something to be fearful of, as something to observe, as something to track for, to monitor, to measure. Because after all, what is a mistake? It's an opportunity to learn. And here's the interesting thing. Good judgment comes from making good decisions. Making good decisions comes from having made poor decisions. So philosophically, as a leader, I would always encourage you to stand in the place of there are no mistakes, only learning. So long as it only happens once. And if it happens repeatedly, look yourself in the mirror because you have failed. Interesting. Anyway, yes?
Incoming comment. Andrew said, don't be afraid to fail. Accept it will happen. Learn from it. Mitigate risks where possible. Make informed decisions, not assumptions. Great. Deal in facts. Let go of the fear and have a go. Because if you sit on the fence, all you'll end up with is splinters in your backside. Make a decision and get on with it. Because at least you can learn from your choice and do something else. Ladies first, Alana.
We haven't said it overtly, but it's sort of touching around it to say to be a good leader, you also have to be a good follower. Yeah. So all of these principles, it's easy enough to apply them to our leadership, but are we good people to be led?
Right.
And so how are we helping our upline leaders also be successful?
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, how are you as a follower? Have you ever thought to consider that? Because the interesting thing about leadership is that you look at the amount of money you invest in sourcing, attracting, onboarding, and getting good people into your business. Now, to what extent do you think that they need you to do their job? They probably don't. They probably know what they're doing. You've hired them to do a job. So why do you do it as well? Because some managers make the mistake of hiring people to do a job and then doing that job for them. And it was Colin Powell that said, if you are doing the work of one of your people, one of you is redundant and it won't be them. So, I'll just leave that discussion for a moment. Samantha.
Well, Pete's also said that that's his common theme, but he's noticed it's all about the people.
It is all about the people. So, in the time we have before lunch, I did say I wasn't going to speak. However, I have been presented an opportunity to share some insights from the world of behavioural neuroscience. So for those of you that have heard those words and are already starting to nod off and eyes glaze over, please let me reassure you that my intent is to simplify the complex. What I'm about to do is to give you the keys to a performance vehicle. The performance vehicle is that bit of real estate between your ears. We've spoken a lot about change this morning, and in my experience, the greatest point of resistance for change occurs between the ears of the people involved in the project. So, if you can set the right context, bring your people with you, think big, make sure you've got a philosophy. Those are great structural elements to understanding how you support your team. But the most important missing element, of course, is us. So, I'm going to take you on a bit of a journey. Stay with me, I'll be asking you lots of questions, and there are no incorrect answers. Let me begin with this question. How do human beings process the world? Neal? Through our senses, exactly. How many do we have? 6. Interesting. Who said that? Do you see dead people? Well, maybe you do. Maybe you do. Traditionally, we have 5 senses. Depending on what you read, you can have up to 12, according to the science and literature now. But understand this, it's our senses that allow us to interact with the world. Is there any other way that we can interact with the world apart from sensory input? Good, I keep asking just in case I've missed something, but I don't think there is. So we either see, smell, taste, touch, or hear the world. Would you agree? Great. What is the primary role of a human being's senses? Anyone? Would you like me to ask you an easier question? No context, Ben. What do you think? Great. To keep you alive and give you the ability to reproduce. You would think that that was the case. However, that is not the case. Interestingly enough... No wrong answers except for that one. Ben, I feel like I've let you down there. That was a really poor leadership opportunity there. I've led him down a path and left him hanging. No, the primary job of a human being's senses is to actually filter most of the world out. Because whether you realise it or not, at any single point in time, you literally have billions of bits of information that are competing for your attention. Example, if I asked you to tell me what you could taste right now, without you being consciously aware of this, you would have diverted your conscious brain into your mouth for a moment. A millisecond, in fact. Almost imperceptibly, you went there. You checked in, you thought, coffee. Come back out and you report coffee. But in the time that you had checked into your mouth, you were nowhere else. That's the specific nature of being able to filter stuff out. We cannot cope with too much information at once. So despite the sophistication of our conscious brains, we need our senses to filter out most of the world. So what thoughts, comments, questions? Anyone want to challenge that? If you do, I'll ask you this question. Why is it that you need to turn the radio down when you're looking for street numbers in the car? What's that got to do with anything?
I was going to say I'm female.
Let me reassure all of you this has nothing to do with gender. And I'm not going to open that can of worms. It's overload. Yeah, exactly. So the sophistication of the conscious brain is amazing. However, its limitation is that it does not cope with a lot of information at once. You will experience, as I'm sure many of you have, that have tried to deal with too many things at once, overwhelm. And in its most extreme definitions, it can be spoken of as a nervous breakdown or a synaptic blowout or something more severe. But it is simply overwhelm. And for those of you that experienced it, I'm sure you don't want to have that experience again. So let's accept the fact that our senses are primary filters of the world. So what are the implications of that? Well, the simplest implication of that is that we, therefore, have created language as a mechanism to create common understanding. Because given that we filter so much of it out, there is zero guarantee that what we are actually experiencing is real. I'll give you an example. Let me hold this item up. Can somebody tell me what it is that I'm holding up, please? A blue pen, great, nice specificity. We've got the colour in there. What else could we call this thing? A texter, great. Could we refer to it as a whiteboard marker? Yes. Okay, is it big or small? It depends, right? So we're now adding layers of context with labels. Understand this, we have created language as human beings in order to create a common experience of something that we have no guarantee is exactly the same for each of us. Does that make sense? So when we talk about communication as an issue in organisations, understand we are only ever dealing with a label. And there is no guarantee that what we are experiencing is actually consistent. So that's the first thing. Our senses act as a filter. And depending on the science you read, we could be filtering out as much as 98% of the actual experience. So lucky we have language to make sense of things. So an event occurs out here, we filter it through our senses, then what happens to it? Because it doesn't just go into our head. What happens to it after that? Through the senses. Say that again? Well, before you have feelings, that information gets filtered again through conscious brain filters, John, that are unique to every single individual. What are examples of our unique and individual conscious brain filters? Past experiences, great. What else? Our values. What else? Beliefs. How about our age? How about our gender? How about our religious affiliations, our cultural backgrounds, our socioeconomic demographics? Every single one of these is uniquely different in all of us and has an impact on filtering that information again. I wonder if you've ever stood in a crowd of people witnessing a train wreck, metaphorically, and then noticing what people are and aren't doing and then passing judgments about that. Fascinating, isn't it? Because we all do it. And the reason we do it is because we have different filters. So again, we start off with this thing called blue pen. We filter the absolute life out of it, and what we're left with is a label. That's what actually hits the conscious brain. So what questions do you have so far in terms of how we experience the world? Great. Let's talk about what happens next. Conscious brain, we've already spoken about its amazing sophistication. The human being's conscious brain has one job and one job only. And no, Ben, it's not to keep us alive. That's it, I've put him off now. He won't answer anymore. Can anybody help me to understand what is the single job of a human being's conscious brain?
Making sense.
In order to?
Well, to interpret our environment.
In order to?
Take action.
Great. The single job of a human being's conscious brain is to make decisions. And everything we do in terms of processing is in order to support a choice or a decision point. So that's the first thing you need to know about the conscious brain. Second thing that you need to understand about your conscious brain is that all of our behaviours are driven by our beliefs. Let me just say that again. All of our behaviours are actually driven out of our beliefs. What's a potential risk associated with strongly held and pragmatic beliefs about stuff? That they're wrong. Yep. And everything is contextual. Remember, there is no right or wrong, good or bad. They can lead to extremism. Absolutely. Excellent, Ben. Nailed it. We get our beliefs generally from other people or from interpretations we have of the things that we've taken on board. Now, the risk with being pragmatic or fanatical about your beliefs is that they can and do change. I'll give you an example. This may be a spoiler alert, but for some of us, when we were little, we used to believe that on the 25th of December, a large individual in a red suit would show up at our houses and leave gifts. Now, some of us choose to no longer believe that, but the fact of the matter is, it's still talked about. We still perpetuate this in our families because we like the values associated with peace on earth, goodwill to mankind, and sharing a meal with loved ones. But understand your conscious brain has a limitation around it. Okay? Beliefs are risky. The third thing is this: what is the intent of a human being's conscious brain? Strange question, isn't it? Well, would it surprise you to know that the intent of our conscious brain is to keep us exactly where we are? It's us that doesn't like change. You can have the best change project supported by the best Gantt charts, the smartest PMs in the world, but if you don't bring the people, it will fail. And the greatest point of resistance to change is between somebody's ears. So, and understand this, that the point of your conscious brain is to actively resist change. It wants the status quo. Now, where's the proof? I'm making all these outrageous claims. Where's the proof? And if you're sitting there thinking that, great. The proof is simplistically described as what ties it all together, which is the voice. What voice am I referring to? Inner voice, exactly. You know, the one that talks to you when you're standing in the shower? Or likes to visit you when you're driving long distances in a car? Or even standing in a queue? The one that interjects comments on everything going on around you. By the way, it's the one that holds all your fears, limitations, foibles, insecurities, and paranoia. And it will deliver them to you just when you need them. It'll rationalise and justify why you were hopeless in that situation, why you did or didn't do the things you did, and it will be your constant companion. And why it's so seductive and compelling is because it's you. But let me tell you this, it is not your friend. And the one thing I would invite you to consider is become aware of your own voice, because it is not designed to assist you. Half the time, who here, by the way, experiences the fact that they choose not to remember somebody's name when they meet them for the first time? Anyone here experience that? Great. So people come up with techniques about remembering names. Oh, you know, peg it to a time or a place, come up with some clever system using memory pegs, do whatever you have to do to remember someone's name. Repeat it often after having met them. The biggest challenge with remembering someone's name is that when they speak to you, you're not actually listening to them. Who are you listening to? You're listening to yourself, Callan, exactly. And it's usually to do with stage managing the greeting. I'm in a social situation, I don't know this person, do I look right, am I saying the right things, is my fly done up, da-da-da-da-da. What did you say? It's usually then that somebody offers you their name. So the tip for all of us is this: listen to the person whose lips are actually moving. It may surprise you to realise that half the time when you're listening to people, you're not actually listening to them, you're listening to your own running commentary about what's going on. And as a good friend of mine and mentor says, if you're not listening to the important people in your world, you need to ask yourself who is, because somebody will be. So let me quickly recap. Information gets filtered through our senses, filtered through our conscious brain filters, hits the conscious brain. From there we process with one intent: to make a decision, understanding the limitations of your conscious brain. Firstly, its only job is to make decisions. All of your behaviours are framed by your beliefs. It doesn't want you to change, and your voice is the thing that ties it all together. So, what questions do you have about this information so far? Okay, so what sits underneath conscious brain, folks? Subconscious, well done, subconscious. Sometimes people say unconscious, and I go, no, that's vodka brain or champagne brain. Subconscious brain has 3 jobs to do. Conscious brain only had 1. What does that tell you about the relative importance of the 2 parts of your head? 3 jobs. What are they? Anyone? Keep you alive. Well done, Samantha. That's one of them, but it's not to the extent that you think. First job of the subconscious brain is to run your physiology. Stop for a moment to think what you would do if breathing was a conscious choice. Exactly. You know, you've misplaced your pen, your phone rings and you stop breathing. Would you choose now between breathing, circulation or respiration? Or digestion? Lucky it's not a conscious choice. It is all being run in the background by your subconscious brain. First job. Second job of the subconscious brain is to record everything. Every experience you've had in every sense is recorded. According to an American neuroscientist, David Eagleman, we have 3 trillion slots for information in our heads. We're born with that. How old do you think we are before they're full? Well done, 2 years old. We are full. Then we go replacing those information slots with things that get repeated rather than things that don't. The voice and smell of your parents get repeated, we anchor. That random thing that you saw driving out as you were driving along in the car, out the window, it doesn't get repeated, that slot gets replaced. We then maintain our information until we get into our 40s, and then they start to diminish, the slots. And the rate of diminishment depends on your genetics, actually. So some of you will age earlier than others, and I'm talking about mental deterioration. But it's a fact of our species. So, in terms of the second job is to record everything. The third and most important job of your subconscious brain is to run a chemical factory. Anybody tell me what the chemical factory is? John? No, we don't need to get into the technical stuff. What's the system called? The endocrine system, exactly. So the endocrine system is that system within our bodies that manages all the chemicals. So we produce chemicals in 3 classes. The first class are called hormones. Who hasn't heard about hormones? They manage gender and sexuality. The second class are called receptors. The job of a receptor is to move stuff around in your body. They're like little transport trucks. Good stuff goes to places, bad stuff gets chucked out. And of course, the third class of chemicals are called endorphins. Endorphins are chemicals the brain produces, and they have certain characteristics that are quite unique. There are other neurotransmitters, I'm not going to get into the specifics here, but the fact is most of the endorphins that we produce are opiates. Now, what do you know about opiates? They are highly addictive. So, for example, who here likes really spicy hot food? Aha. Okay, and do you find that you crave it? Yes, okay. Interestingly enough, most people that find that they get addicted to hot and spicy food are not actually addicted to the food. They're addicted to their own endorphin, which they produce to manage the pain, and get hooked on that. For those of you that have pushed your bodies beyond their own capacity to feel pain, either in a work context, if you were a defence member or a services member, or in fact in a social context as an athlete. Anybody here had the experience of hitting the wall and then pushing through it? That warm, fuzzy feeling that you get as you push through the wall is the endorphin release associated with managing the pain. It allows you to go on. But of course, pain is a feedback loop. If you ignore that pain for long enough, you will break. And your chemicals have the capacity to protect you from it. So, why am I telling you this? What has this got to do with anything? Well, here's the thing. What drives the endocrine system is our thoughts and our words. Every single thought that you have and every single thing you say is producing a chemical array, whether you choose it to or not. So what are the implications of that? Language becomes very important. I wonder how many of you have met somebody and asked them how they're going, only to hear this response, not bad. Anybody heard that response? Anyone here use it? Come on, own up. John, you do? Great. When you say to someone, not bad, what are you actually saying? What does that mean?
In the context of what we're talking about, that everything is status quo and fine.
Everything's status quo and fine. Okay, because it doesn't sound like that. Interesting. So sometimes when I'm trying to unpack what not bad means with people, I invite them to consider that in my model of the world it means mediocre. And I get people that want to challenge me and go, hang on, no, I didn't mean mediocre, I just meant, status quo. And I go, well, when you get to 4 p.m. and your day has turned out to be mediocre, well planned. Because here's the thing, every single day when you open your eyes in the morning, you've got a choice point, don't you? You meet somebody, a stranger for the first time, they ask you how you're going. You could respond in an effusive way, as I tend to do. I have 3 standard responses to that question. I'm exceptional, I'm sensational, or I'm awesome. The risk associated with that, particularly in a country like Australia, is that somebody will look at you and go, come on mate, you're a wanker. And of course, anticipating that response from people, my standard response back to them is, well, what you think of me is none of my business. Unless, of course, I choose to invest. So, why have I told you this in the remaining time we have before we take a well-earned break for lunch? What is the implication here? What are you noticing already? Because I can tell that most of you have already stopped listening to me. You're listening to your own commentary on what's being said. How do I know? Because every single human being on the planet knows when they're not being listened to. So welcome back. See how insidious this is, how seductive it is to be sucked into your own conversation and stop listening to the person whose lips are moving? Okay. Another example of how simple language can be in terms of the implication of it. I wonder how many of you ask people to not forget to do things. Don't forget to put the bin out. Don't forget to feed the dog. Don't forget to da-da-da. Anyone use that expression? Yeah? Great. And in your experience, what's the outcome you get? Okay, most people will report that when they use that expression, the other person forgets. Now, why not say, please remember? It's a simple linguistic change, but it has a massive implication on the outcome. Now, please don't take my word for anything I'm sharing with you. Try it. I can guarantee you'll get away with it for quite a long time, and you'll start to influence the behaviour of the people around you. What has this got to do with leadership? What has this got to do with lessons learned? Well, I'd like you to reflect for a moment on the language you've been using to yourself and the people around you. Because I can assure you that some of it is based on belief systems that you did not create, and some of it is completely unresourceful. So, as an example, you know, when we're talking to people and we're offering them guidance and advice as leaders, and somebody comes to us with a problem, and we say, look, why is that a problem? And they tell you. Let me give you a personal recommendation. When dealing with people, using the question why is unresourceful. Why do you think I would say that? What do you think you hear from people when you ask them a question that begins with why? Great. You hear an opinion, you hear rationale, you hear somebody else's rationale, you hear an excuse. Samantha alluded to it earlier when talking about salespeople. She noticed that the more she did for people, the more they'd ask her. It's a common mistake for parents as well. You become an enabler of victim behaviour. The more we do for our children, the less able we make them in the world, because the world will not treat them the way you do. So the best way we can equip our people, and whether they be our children or in fact our staff, is to allow them the opportunity to learn through making decisions. Be there to support and coach them if the decision didn't achieve the outcome that you thought it would. But certainly be prepared to support and serve them. As Trian said earlier, this is a topic that I'm very passionate about, so I could spend an inordinate amount of time discussing it. However, I won't. Let me throw to you at this stage for any questions you might have about any information I've shared with you. So, there's something else. There's one final request I have of you that are in the room. And unfortunately for our viewers who are calling in, I can't hear you, so I can't offer this to you in this way. But it's a coaching technique. It's based on the principle that most of our behaviour as human beings and most of our speech is actually subconscious to us. What does that actually mean? What it means is that the way the world hears you and sees you is not the way you think it does. Now, if you are a relatively self-aware person, great. Generally speaking, you will be congruent. Your words will match your actions. However, sometimes, if you're not aware, you could go around thinking that you're great, and everyone else could think you're not great. So, the risk associated with that is the risk of a lack of self-awareness. in terms of your own behaviour. So I'd like to ask your permission for the balance of the day for the people that are in the room. And this is an opportunity to coach you. Do I have your permission, folks? Great. Some people are nervously saying yes because they have no idea what they've just signed up for. What you've signed up for is this. If I hear you say something that I would like to challenge respectfully and resourcefully, because you've probably used a subconscious speech pattern or you're not aware you said what you said, my coaching will be these words. If you say so. So, for the balance of the day, if you hear me say those words to you, I've just heard you say something that probably is unresourceful, you're not even aware you're saying it, and you can maybe rephrase it. Is that okay with you? Okay, by the way, you reserve the right to do it to me, and please do it to me because I don't know how I'm coming across to you just yet. Ever notice that when you see yourself on video or hear yourself on tape, most people cringe? What's the cringe about? Crazy, isn't it? So I wonder if you've ever heard your voice on tape, gentlemen. Yeah? Did you like it? No? Then why the hell do you do it to us? That's the point I'm trying to make. The way you sound to others has nothing to do with how you criticise or judge yourself, because they've already come to accept you the way you are. So therefore, in the spirit of the balance of the day, thank you for taking on board the opportunity to coach me. And I'm unashamedly throw myself at your feet and say, please reflect me back at me because I don't see it. And in that same spirit, I invite you I thank you for the opportunity to coach you as well. In summary around this topic, be aware of the language that you and others around you are using as a leader, because the words you use will have an impact. As Dave mentioned earlier in his example, and others will speak about today as well, the words in the absence of context can have a devastating effect on people. So, in terms of leadership communication, make sure you cover off 4 questions. Why, what, how, and what if in any communication. Make sure you've picked up those 4 elements and make sure you're simple and consistent with your speech.